I think it might still be free, but that's okay. Get yourself some great merchandise from the station's website. Buy a CD to favorite hosts, shows for a previous season, and possibly get yourself acquire an EMP-proof thumb drive with survival documents. There's seed packs, a whole bunch of stuff. Follow the instructions when you're making your donation, and you will receive a gift in return. Thanks for listening to Revolution Radio. And then we're halfway through show number 496.
690 and 400.
100. This is, from what I could determine, this should actually be the ET question, a rational approach, part 9.
Part 9. Good. And let's jump right into it. Now, the reality of the UFO, which is unidentified flying object, or objects, UAP, which is unidentified aerial phenomenon, same thing. Just had to call it something else in our situation. So it's the reality of the situation, right? UFO, UAP, I don't care, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to stick with UFO because that's what I grew up with. The UFO phenomenon is real. That's it. Full stop. We do not know what it is, hence the U, but something is there. The funny thing is, though, that authorities cannot bring themselves to say UFOs are real. No. What is real are UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. As though acknowledging the term UFO would bring down the heavens and destroy the skeptics and armchair debunkers. One can live in hope. But ultimately, people have made careers out of debunking UFOs, out of debunking the whole ET question, if you will, the alien question. We're not saying that UFOs are spaceships. We're not saying they're inhabited by aliens. None of that at all. We just don't know what they are. But people have tried for decades to discredit anybody who chose to seriously investigate and accumulate data and, essentially just come up with an explanation. By calling it UAP, it seems as though we're talking about a new and hitherto unknown phenomenon. I mean, what a load of bunkum. The double standards and hypocrisy stink to high heaven, but it is a small victory. It is real, everybody. You no longer have to feel like you have to defend your position. The UFO phenomenon is now a fact. Here it is. Tic-tac. It's a thing. We don't know what it is. We've officially released it. No, we still don't know what it is. No, still don't know. It's an unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now, the following article, and I'll throw it over to my esteemed co-host, deals with the encounter that broke the bank, so to speak, the Tic-tac encounter. Believe it or not, the actual encounter happened in 2004. But Dave, why did you take us through the Nimitz case?
Yeah, okay. So prior to the incident that Meckie's launched us into here, which is great, one of my favorites, early November 2004, the Ticonderoga class guided missile cruiser, the USS Princeton, part of the carrier group or carrier strike group 11, had been tracking mysterious aircraft intermittently for 2 weeks on an advanced AN Spy 1B passive radar. Navy Chief Petty Officer NCO E7 Kevin Day, stationed on Princeton, recalls that he first noticed that clear radar traces of 8 to 10 objects on or around the 10th of November. That's 2004. They were travelling southwards in a loose, though fixed formation at 28,000 feet, which is 8.5 miles. In the immediate vicinity of the Catalina Islands. Now, Meckie, when I went to school over there in 82, 83, Catalina Islands, went out there, all the locals knew about these sightings back then in the 80s.
Right.
Catalina was a hot spot for them emerging out of the water and going into the water. It was just a thing. And no one gave it a second thought. Oh, that's just the thing that happens over there. If we go over there, maybe you'll see some. That's how the people there were used to it in SoCal. So Kevin Day was startled by their slow speed of 100 knots. That's about 190 kilometers an hour or 120 miles an hour. But received confirmation of their presence from radar operators on other vessels as well. Regular observations were made of a similar number of objects over the following 6 days. So this isn't like a one-time thing. The objects were also faintly detected by an E-2C Hawkeye plane after Princeton sent them coordinates to check. Now it goes on to visual sightings. An unclassified and redacted summary of the event released by the US military. When the same event occurred again around 9:30 PST on the 14th of November 2004, an operations officer aboard Princeton contacted 2 airborne US Navy Boeing FA-18EF Super Hornets from the USS Nimitz, flying a combat exercise at the time, already airborne. The aircraft were 2-seat variants. Each a pilot was accompanied by a weapons systems officer, or WSO. The lead Super Hornet was piloted by Commander David Fravor, commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41. The second fighter, flying as wingman, included Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate as one of the 2 officers aboard. Princeton's radar operator, Kevin Day, directly instructed the pilots to change their course and investigate the unidentified radar spot observed by Princeton's own radar. This was done to determine if the objects posed any collision danger to an upcoming air defense exercise. A radio operator on Princeton, however, asked the pilots if they were carrying operational weapons, and the pilots replied that they were not, so they weren't armed. The weather conditions for that day showed excellent visibility with blue sky, no cloud cover, and a calm sea. Usually when they're not, when they were doing test or training missions, that their weapons are replaced by cameras. When the jet fighters arrived on site, the crew of 4 saw nothing in the air nor on their radar. On Princeton's radar, however, it was noticed that the object now dropped from 28,000 feet near to sea level in less than a second. As the pilots looked down at the sea, they noticed a turbulent oval area of churning water with foam and frothy waves, the size of a Boeing 737 plane, with a smoother area of lighter color at the center, as if the waves were breaking over something just under the surface. A few seconds later, they noticed an unusual object hovering with erratic movements 50 feet, maybe 15 meters, above the churning water. Both Fravor and Slate later described the object as a large, bright white tic-tac, 30 to 46 feet in dimensions. Otherwise, you might know that as 9.1 meters to 14 meters long, with no windshield, nor portholes, no wing, no, I don't know what that is, empennage, and no visible engine nor exhaust plume. So that's no wings, no tail, no portholes, no windshield, nothing, not even exhaust plumes or engines, in any sign of propulsion. There was nothing. Fravor began a circular descent to approach the object. As Fravor further descended, he reported that the object began ascending along a curved path, maintaining some distance from the F-18, mirroring its trajectory in opposite circles. Fravor then made a more aggressive maneuver, plunging his fighter to aim below the object, but at this point the UFO accelerated and went out of sight in less than 2 seconds, leaving the pilots pretty weirded out. Subsequently, the two jet fighters began a new course to the Combat Air Patrol, the CAP rendezvous point. Within seconds, Princeton radioed the jets that the radar target had reappeared 60 miles away. That's nearly 100 kilometers, 97 kilometers away. At this predetermined rendezvous point, that's the CAP point. It actually, the UFO appeared at their Combat Air Patrol CAP point. According to popular mechanics, a physical object would have had to move greater than 2,400 miles per hour, so 3,900 kilometers an hour, to cover the distance in the reported time. Two other jets went to investigate the new radar location, but by the time the Super Hornets arrived, the object had already disappeared. Both F-18s then returned to the Nimitz. Commander Fravor reflected on his sighting, saying, "I have no idea what I saw. It had no plumes, wings, or rotors, or outran our F-18s. But I want to fly one." Necki.
Which brings us to the infrared footage. After the return of the first team to Nimitz, the second team took off approximately 1200 PST, Pacific Standard Time. This time equipped with an advanced infrared camera, an FLIR pod. This camera recorded an evasive unidentified aerial system on video, publicly released by the Pentagon on December 16, 2017, alongside the revelation of the funding of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. ATIP, that's right. This footage is known as the 2004 USS Nimitz FLIR-1 video, flyer video. It officially shed some light on a decade-old story that was largely unknown, except for a 2015 second-hand story on FighterSweep.com that, in spite of providing many details, remained unconfirmed at that time. A second infrared footage, known as the Gimbal video, GIMBAL, has been released by the Pentagon alongside the 2004 Flyer-1 footage. Although the media often present the two videos together to illustrate the 2004 USS Nimitz UFO incident, the Gimbal video is unrelated, filmed at the east coast of the United States at an unknown date.
Yeah, but it's got the same type of object in it.
Yeah.
So you've got to, just so everyone understands what we've seen in the infrared, the FLIR video and the Gimbal video, is non-classified technology capture of video. The kind of telemetry that the pilots have and what's actually recorded is classified, and you can't see what they actually saw on their instrumentation. This is not classified technology, and therefore they could release that. It ended up being approved for release, right? So just saying that, because once again, all of the science kinds of folk said surely on an F-18 would have a better resolution. This is all fake. What a load of rubbish. I don't want to look at any more of these blurry images. However, what's true is this is the unclassified, low-res versions of what the pilots can actually see. So
correct.
Just knowing that, which those science types should have understood that, and shouldn't openly debunk it, with impunity. I believe what they are is that the fail-safe, Mickey, because I don't want my head to explode tomorrow and society to end. And if you get, Neil deGrasse Tyson up there saying, well, there's still no real evidence, even after seeing the footage, and it being released by the US military, and them saying, yes, this is real footage of stuff we don't understand. Having said all that, the people out there whose lives, who are in a position mentally that they wouldn't be able to cope with this information if it were true, can easily rest and be calmed, Mickey. Oh, it's like getting stroked. Like if you're a cat and your owner pats you, and it doesn't matter. It's okay. That's what Neil deGrasse Tyson's into.
Yeah, look, I think we're mentally more prepared than we ever have been in the past.
The Brookings Report
60 years
now. Don't keep pulling that thing out of the cupboard, right?
Yeah. Look, that's right. So just after, and I need to go back before I go to the next article. It's usually popular culture that shows us the differences best, because art usually is a mirror of life. And I'm referring here to the first Captain America movie, which you might hate it, you might like it, I don't know, right? But I enjoyed it. But the point I'm trying to make here is when Captain Rogers was frozen in the Arctic, I think it was, and then he was awakened some, I don't know, 40 or 50 years later, whenever. I think it was 50 or 60 years. But the point is, he was awakened, and he had lost decades, right? The America that he remembered is no longer the America that we have here today. So the America of the 40s and 50s, to some extent the 60s, but less so, it's a very different country. It's a very different place to the America or the world at large that we have today. In many ways, while I don't want to romanticize it, it was probably a little bit more innocent. It was a little bit more, I don't know, it wasn't as raw, and people still had firm moral beliefs. I mean, they believed in the righteousness of certain things. I think religion played a much greater role in life than it does today. I think people, generally, maybe even had a more positive outlook on life, potentially. Certainly in America after World War II, there was a buoyancy that America and even Europe felt after the Marshall Plan, large tracts of Asia, etc., etc. So it was a different time, and at that time it might have been catastrophic potentially to have full disclosure. Yes, there are things that we don't know, and this is what they are, and it would have shaken people's core beliefs. I don't think people have core beliefs anymore, Dave. I mean, some people, of course, some people still do, but our global culture, if you look at it, right, in its raw and unadulterated format, right, limited attention spans, reality TV, social media, influencers, people being famous for being famous, like the Kardashians. I shouldn't hate on them too much, right? But ultimately, it's a different world. It's a completely different world, and the people that have lost their moral compass, their North Star, is growing by the day, in my opinion. But by the same token, we've become a lot more accepting. I mean, I'll give you simple examples, right? Gay marriage is now an accepted thing. It's not really irking people too much anymore. They're talking about having women ordained as Catholic priests. The abuse that the Catholic Church and other churches have inflicted upon the victims is now openly discussed. The abuse women are suffering is openly discussed and addressed in some instances. Maybe not fast enough, but it is happening, right? So there are a lot of things that are changing. All the institutions that were sacrosanct at some point, that you couldn't touch. I mean, the Catholic Church was untouchable. Generally, other churches were untouchable. The old boys club was untouchable. But we're seeing women rising up through the ranks. We're seeing gender roles.
Gender equality is still trying to be ironed out.
Yeah, but it's moving in the right direction, right? In many ways, right? Sure. And it's a different. So it is a time where revolution of thought is certainly a possibility. We can accept these things now as something.
We're in a box, remember? Sorry.
Oh, no, exactly. Well, that goes without saying. Now, is disclosure going to give us? And if you know what Dave and I are talking about when it comes to the hypothesis, then you might understand where we're going with this. But as long as you discuss everything within the box, everything is fine. And I think all of these things are still within the box. And I would very much urge you to listen to the show number 500 cycle, like all the shows that will follow that, because we're going to be discussing the hypothesis with new evidence and new insights and new thoughts. I formulated now a chapter, and I predict, Dave, that the book will be finished by the end of 2022.
Excellent.
But it is now a different time, a time which lends itself more. I think we've become mentally more resilient in some ways, and in fact, not actually, that's the wrong word. Maybe we've become mentally, I don't know, more malleable, spongy. Like we're sponges. But we're sponges that have things drop out of them. So more like a sieve, I guess, than a sponge. Where we pay attention to something for a little bit, and then we don't really care anymore. And what I mean by that is,
the news cycle's done that to us.
Exactly. News cycle, but also social media. I mean, TikToks are like, what, 15, 20 seconds, whatever they are. But if you look at this, all of these things that are happening, people are, channel surfing and they're getting. I mean, we're now discussing the nature of truth. I mean, it is my truth and it is your truth, and we're talking about the nature of knowledge. My knowledge or my ignorance is as good as your knowledge. Thank you very much.
Becky,
It's a really interesting.
I've got like
kind
seven video streaming services, and I can't watch anything.
Yeah, I know, right?
Right?
And then we've got it's crazy, but there's some shows on TV which people just seem to ignore, and if you actually watch them, you'd be going, holy moly!
Yeah.
I would never have thought I would see this ever broadcast anywhere by anyone. And again, I harp on this, but you have to watch The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. This is now the second season is out.
I think
really
we should approach them for a sponsorship. Because
we should. I mean, I'd love to have a chat to those guys, or even invite them on the show and really understand, because these are some real people doing some real stuff. I mean, these are, it's you should. I really do urge you to have a look at it. It's really quite astounding. There are other shows as well, but this one is really groundbreaking, because for the first time, the person that is bankrolling this, right, the exploration of the Skinwalker Ranch, is actually happy to share it all, because Bigelow didn't share very much at all. He just kept it all under wraps, right? NDIS and all that. So it was pretty much. Still, we don't know what all the things that he found out. Whereas the new team is it seems to be very transparent, and they're bringing us evidence and insights that we had just clearly not even dreamt of. Really quite amazing. But the point is, again, this is the time for this information to come out, because I think, Dave, my point is, I think people just wouldn't care as much as they used to. Maybe you've seen all these. You've seen Star Wars, you've seen Star Trek, you've seen Babylon 5, you've seen every other science fiction movie, science fiction TV show. You've seen more aliens in your life than anybody in the 50s would ever have. Right?
It's even the grey alien was on my children's what's it called, trampoline mat.
Yeah.
Someone decided to put that on there. It just became a thing. It's just shaped like all the other shapes.
Yeah, honestly,
Mackie,
yeah.
The appearance of aliens. They'll come here. It's going to be fine. E.T. Paul, and all those things. They're kindly. What the hell, right? It's all good.
Yeah, or even if they're a threat. I mean, if you lived in a major city in the world, initially I'm sure there would be heads turning, eyebrows raised, and astounding, right? Mm-hmm. But Men in Black, for example, right? I mean, you look at that movie franchise, and they're all among us. They're living here. They live some in exile, whatever. And I don't think. Yeah, I don't think people would be. I mean, it would be something for the news cycle for a while, but then because we've had a lot of shocks to the system, Dave. We had catastrophic climatic events, right? Fires, floods, storms, etc. Right? We had, including really really cold weather as well. We had catastrophic economic situations happening, right, in the last decade. We had catastrophic health issues, like
it's got to be time then.
Yeah, the current pandemic. I mean, we've been pummeled and punched, and we are on the corner, right? We're in the corner. We're on the ropes, right? We're swaying. We're dizzy from we are from all the stuff.
A nice way of putting it, Mickey. Nice
right? And we are what's next? What is going to hit me next? What punch? Where's it coming from, right?
That's right.
Because there's so much going on in such a short space of time, and people being displaced, monumental shifts in politics, in geography, countries founded, countries disappearing, conflict all over the place, right? The world is on fire, and the world that isn't on fire is flooding. So you're either being washed away or you're burning out. I mean, it's astounding what we're seeing here, and this would just be another thing. Yeah, okay, it's just another thing. Oh yeah, there are extra-dimensional travelers. There are extraterrestrial travelers. Blah 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 blah. Whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. They live here. Imagine if the words came out of their mouths to say, "We really wanted to tell you, but when we went to the moon was when they reached out to us." Right? Can you imagine if they said that?
Yeah.
And what they said was that they've come here to live. They just want to be quiet, right? They don't care. Every once in a while, when we're playing up, they'll make themselves known, and then they disappear again for 100 years or whatever, right? They don't want any fuss. Imagine if that happened.
Yeah.
You know, they've clearly got tech that's way beyond us, and
Yeah.
you know, they could. You know, I think that's a reasonable expectation from the head of their culture to the head of our culture to have reached out and said something like that. You know, what? Hey, we see you getting a bit strong there on the old weapons thing. How about you settle it back? You know,
Yeah.
what about world peace or something, right? I don't
Yeah.
know.
And that's a beautiful segue actually into the next article, believe it or not. And this was written June 25, 2021. So, you know, only a couple of months ago. And this is an article by Pavitra George, and it's titled Normalizing UFOs. A retired US Navy pilot recalls Tic Tac encounter. Washington, June 24, Reuters. Retired US Navy Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich found herself in the glare of media attention ahead of a highly anticipated government report on UFOs, a subject she says she has little interest in, despite actually encountering one on the job. I don't consider myself a whistleblower. I don't identify as a UFO person, the former fighter pilot told Reuters in a Zoom interview days before the report. Expected to feature her own experience and dozens of others like it, was due for presentation to Congress. During a routine training mission with the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz off the Southern California coast in November 2004, Dietrich and her then commanding officer, fellow pilot David Fravor, from the previous article, you recall, were asked by another warship to investigate radar contacts in the area moving in an inexplicable fashion. She recounted they first noticed an unusual churning of the ocean surface before seeing what she and Fravor have described as a smooth, white oblong object resembling a large tic-tac breath mint flying at high speed over the water. Now, I just want to say something about the churning water, which was also mentioned in the article earlier. The churning water is a recurring theme when it comes to the phenomenon that are observed in the Bermuda Triangle.
Yes.
The churning white water is and then, you know, the disappearance of ships and planes, etc., etc. It's always the churning white water. Now we know for a fact that this churning white water is real because it has been reported here.
And
that's an accepted report.
It seems to be associated with ETs now.
Well,
it's UAPs.
It's yeah. Well, yeah. It is part of the lore now, along with Bigfoot and other things, right? Mm-hmm. Now when Fravor in his jet turned to engage with the object, it appeared to respond in a way that we didn't recognize because it seemed to lack any visible flight control surfaces or means of propulsion, Dietrich recalled. Footage of what Dietrich and Fravor witnessed that day, now popularly known as the Tic Tac incident, will likely be included in the upcoming report to Congress, along with two other declassified videos taken by US Navy fighter jets in 2015 in similar encounters with what the government calls unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. The US Navy has previously confirmed the videos as authentic. Dietrich, now a mother of three, has discussed her experiences in a recent joint appearance with Fravor on the CBS News program 60 Minutes, and has since addressed dozens of video calls from other journalists asking to know more about what she saw in 2004. Her answer remains the same as it has for the past 17 years, and this is it. We don't know what it was, but it could have been a natural phenomenon in human activity. But the point was that it was weird, and we couldn't recognize it, Dietrich said, speaking from a Colorado hotel room she was sharing with her children and two dogs. Juggling media queries amid a cross-country family move is exhausting, but Dietrich said she wants to reduce the stigma attached to reporting UFO sightings and hopes more people can speak up without fear of ridicule. Folks might be concerned about their careers or their church or something like that. They don't want to be the kooky UFO person like Dave and I. So I guess I'm trying to normalize it by talking about it, Dietrich said. Public fascination with unidentified flying objects has been stoked in recent weeks by the forthcoming report. As UFO enthusiasts anticipate possible revelations about unexplained sightings, many believe the government has sought to discredit or cover up for decades. According to preliminary details reported by the New York Times, citing senior administration officials briefed on the report, U.S. intelligence officials found no evidence at UAP observed by Navy aviators in recent years for alien spacecraft, but the sightings still remain unexplained. Now, it's interesting, Dave, that they're saying it's not alien spacecraft, but we don't know what they are, isn't it? It's really quite. Oh no, it's definitely not that. We don't know what it is, but it's not a hot dog. Senior U.S. officials cited in the Times article said the report's ambiguity meant the government was unable to definitively rule out extraterrestrial origins of the sightings. Okay? They were unable to definitively rule that out. The Times said the report to be presented by U.S. intelligence in conjunction with the Pentagon covers more than 120 documented cases of enigmatic objects exhibiting speed and maneuverability exceeding known aviation technologies. Dietrich said she has no opinion on the report and was not privy to its contents. She would like to hear more from pilots who have had similar UFO sightings. There's a common humanity, I guess, she says, of being a little bit shocked, a little bit delighted, a little bit nervous, confused, all of that. And so, recognizing that in another human can be comforting in a way, of course. But Dietrich also voiced hope that public interest in UFOs would abate as the subject gains more mainstream attention. I hope I'm not the UFO tic-tac person for the rest of my life. This is not what I envisioned for myself, she said. That's the end of the report. But why don't you, Dave, take us through the other article, which, again, is fascinating.
So, Navy pilot who filmed the Tic Tac UFO speaks it wasn't behaving by the normal laws of physics, by Matthew Phelan. Okay, so Chad Underwood. In the 15 years since Chad Underwood recorded a bizarre and erratic UFO, now called the Tic Tac, a name Underwood himself came up with, from the infrared camera on the left wing of his FA-18 Super Hornet. He's become a flight instructor, a civilian employee in the aerospace industry, and a father, but he has not yet spoken publicly about what he saw that day. Even now, 2 years after his video made the front page of the New York Times. As he explained before speaking with Intelligencer, Underwood has mostly wanted to avoid having his name attached to this little green men crazies that are out there. The story of the Tic Tac begins around November 10th, 2004, when radar operator Kevin Day first reported seeing odd and slow-moving objects in groups of 5 to 10 off San Clemente Island, west of the San Diego coast, at an elevation of 28,000 feet, moving at a speed of approximately 120 knots. Their clusters were too high to be birds, too slow to be conventional aircraft, and were not traveling on any established flight path, at least according to Day. In a military report made public by KLAS TV in Las Vegas, another crew member with 17 years of experience on similar cruises would later observe that the objects exhibited ballistic missile characteristics as they zoomed from 60,000 feet to 50 feet above the ocean, alarming without producing sonic booms. All told, radar operators with the Princeton spent about 2 weeks attempting to figure out what the objects were, a process that included having the ship's radar system shut down and recalibrated to make sure the mysterious radar returns were not false positives or ghost tracks. Eventually, David Fravor, commanding officer of the Black Aces, made visual confirmation of one of the objects mid-air during a flight training exercise. An hour later, Underwood made his infrared recording on a second flight. That day, Underwood recalls David Fravor was like, "Hey dude, BOLO." I don't understand what that means. I know what YOLO means. You only live once. Like, be on the lookout for something for something weird. I can't remember the exact terms he used. I didn't really think much about it at the time, but once I was able to acquire it on the radar and on the FLIR, as the forward-looking infrared camera, that's kind of where things, I wouldn't say went sideways, but things were just different. The footage appears to depict what Fravor had identified as a 40-foot-long white oblong-shaped hence Tic Tac, hovering somewhere between 15,000 and 24,000 feet midair and exhibiting no notable exhaust from conventional propulsion sources, even as it makes a surprising dart leftwards in the video's final moments. Of the three UFO incidences captured by US Navy airmen via infrared gun camera pods, Underwood's footage remains unique for its lack of crosstalk between the pilots, a fact that has led to some speculation about its authenticity, but there wasn't anything on it that was protected. Underwood's retired former commanding officer Dave Fravor told Intelligencer the missing audio, he says, just didn't make the copy that was taken from the storage drive. A former pilot who served on the NEMS in 2004, who spoke to Intelligencer on condition of anonymity, recalls an exhilarating group seeing a screening of the FLIR 1 video inside the Nimitz carrier vehicle intelligence center, the CVIC. Debriefs were usually pro forma in the CVIC, but this one in particular was so odd. The former pilot said, there weren't really a lot of skeptics in that room. Years later, Fravor told ABC News that he didn't know what the Tic Tac was, but that it was really impressive, really fast, and I would like to fly it. In the CVIC that day, the anonymous pilot told Intelligencer, we all had that. We all wanted to fly it. Of the many people who have spotted or recorded the objects, a handful like Fravor or Princeton's retired Chief Master at Arms, Sean Cahill, who reported seeing what appeared to be another grouping of objects from the missile cruiser's deck, have spoken to journalists or documentarians. Others have not. Lieutenant Colonel Cheeks Kurth, a Marine Hornet Squadron commanding officer who was also asked to intercept the Tic Tac, still has not done an on-the-record interview. 3 years after the sighting, however, Kurth did take a job as a program manager at Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Studies in Las Vegas, whose owner, Robert Bigelow, has been a well-known private funder of UFO and paranormal research for decades. It was during this time period that Bigelow became a military contractor working on the Pentagon's once secret UFO investigation program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. Underwood now joins Fravor, Cahill, and others in speaking about his experience with the Tic Tac. This conversation has been condensed and edited for clarity. Just 1 second. Bigelow has an alien grey face as his logo. He is the single most well-funded person who's attempting space travel, space machines.
Yes,
right? Go on.
He's also the former owner of the Skinwalker Ranch. It was his team that investigated the Skinwalker Ranch for 20 years, but he has made very little of his research publicly available.
Yeah, you're going to take it. You can take it after, probably not.
Well, I was thinking we could do. So the bold is the question, and the non-bold is the answer.
Why don't you
do the question?
Yeah, I'll read the question.
How about that? Yeah. So this is the interview, everybody. Okay.
What did you think of Dave Fravor's appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience?
I'm glad Dave went on Joe's show. He nailed every detail. At the time of the incident, he was essentially my boss, my commanding officer. I was just a pilot in his squadron. Are you familiar at all with how aircraft carrier air operations work?
Probably not.
So usually we fly for about an hour and a half, and then land. And then there's the next wave of folks that take off and do their mission, blah, blah, blah. That day, Dave Fravor was landing at the same time I was getting my gear on, and we crossed paths just after he'd seen it. I really want to get into the detail. Sorry, get into what Dave saw specifically to summarize Fravors' eyewitness account to the New York Times. Pilot reportedly seeing a large submerged object that was causing the ocean to churn. Hovering about 50 feet above that churn, the 40-foot Tic Tac zipped erratically around the submerged object. Fravor observed the Tic Tac as he banked his FA-18 in a spiral descent to get a closer look. As he told the Times, the Tic Tac accelerated like nothing I've ever seen and left him pretty weirded out, because I didn't see it with my own eyeballs, but I told him that Princeton, again, which has got a really good sophisticated radar, is reporting that there's an object out there that they wanted us to see if we could find and if we're able to track. So we go out to where our designated training area is. We're not necessarily looking for something, but the Princeton had a specific that they wanted us to hunt, for lack of a better word. And all of a sudden, I got this blip on my radar.
The Tic Tac?
The term Tic Tac, I actually coined that. So anytime you heard the term, it looked like a Tic Tac out there in the sky, I was the one that kind of coined that.
Was that named based on what you saw with your own eyes or from looking at the screen on a camera?
No, I was more concentrated on looking at the FLIR, Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared. Is an optical, the ATLFR is an optical electrical thermal imaging system that was developed for US Navy pilots by Raytheon in the late 1990s, mainly for the detection and identification of tactical targets and the delivery of autonomous precision targeting to smart weapons. In the mid-2000s, as well as today, ATF-LIR was capable of detecting and tracking targets within a range of 40 nautical miles. It was inside of 20 miles. You're not going to see it with your own eyes until probably 10 miles. And then you're not going to be able to visually track it until you're probably inside of 5 miles, which is where Dave Fravor said he saw it. So at that point, I didn't see anything with my eyeballs. I was more concerned with tracking it, making sure that the videotape was on so that I could bring something back to the ship so that the intel folks could dissect whatever it is that I captured. The thing that stood out to me the most was how erratic it was behaving. And what I mean by erratic is that it changes in altitude, airspeed, and aspects were just unlike things that I've ever encountered before flying against other targets. It was just behaving in ways that aren't physically normal. That's what caught my eye. Because aircraft, whether they're manned or unmanned, still have to obey the laws of physics. They have to have some source of lift, some source of propulsion. The Tic Tac was not doing that. It was going from like 50,000 feet to, 100 feet in like seconds, which is not possible.
And it was doing that during your engagement too?
Yes, that was the thing that was the most interesting to me. How erratic this thing was. Jim Gillingham, an engineering consultant who worked on the ATF-LIR for Raytheon, suggested an interview with him that if there were several things in the sky to look at, but none were quite where the pilot was trying to look, it might produce erratic results. A glitch he'd experienced using the ATF-LIR to track planes from the ground during development testing. We ran into this when trying to get a lock, and there were 2 aircraft climbing out. LAX has 4 parallel runways. Sometimes the image would switch back and forth vigorously until we took steps to bias the lock some way. If it was obeying physics like a normal object that you would encounter in the sky, an aircraft or a cruise missile or some sort of special object that the government didn't tell you about, that would have made more sense to me. The part that drew our attention was how it wasn't behaving within the normal laws of physics. You're up there flying like, okay, it's not behaving in a manner that's predictable or is normal by how flying objects physically move.
From looking at the video at the time and more recently, do you get a sense as to how much heat this thing was giving off?
Well, normally you would see engines emitting a heat plume. This object was not doing that. The video shows a source of heat, but the normal signatures of an exhaust plume were not there. There was no sign of propulsion. You could not see the thing that the ATF-LIR pod should pick up 100% of the time, the source of heat, an exhaust that a normal object flying would give off. Would give you. Former Navy F-18 fighter pilot Vincent Aiello expressed a similar reaction to the object in the FLIR-1 video during a telephone interview. Where it looks different to me is that it has no wings like an aircraft, and there's no perceptible heat signature from the engines or from intakes like an aircraft, he said. If you're close enough to an actual aircraft and you're tracking it, you can see heat spots at different places, either leading edges of wings where it's hotter because of friction, or exhaust ports from where bleed air comes out. And of course, the actual exhaust of the engines themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Like, no method of propulsion or exhaust, and the exhaust part of it was the thing that kind of made me raise my eyebrows and be like, okay, this is interesting.
Were you approaching the Tic Tac head on? Some people have suggested the main source for this theory is a long-time contributor to the Skeptical Inquirer, retired Air Force Major James McGarr, whose primary flight experience, per his bio with the Skeptic Group, is with large C-130 military transport aircraft, no fighter jets, in other words, nor their instruments. That the Tic Tac rapid leftward movement towards the end of the video was actually the result of your FA-18 banking to the right and dragging the camera along with it.
We were pointed nose onto it, maybe 10 to 20 degrees of azimuth. Azimuth is a horizontal angular measurement between a fixed direction, which in this flight navigation case is straight ahead of the aircraft, and an object or location. In aviation, azimuth is paired with a vertical angular measurement called altitude, which should not be confused with the more common use of the word as a synonym for elevation, either left or right.
Ergo, when the object kind of darts away to the left.
I was not aggressively maneuvering the aircraft in the manner that would make the FLIR pod would do that. Underwood's recollections on this were corroborated by Stephen T. Cummings, a former technical director for Raytheon Integrated Defense Systems, who worked on ATF-LIR in its R&D phase and reviewed the FLIR-1 video for this story. That said, Cummings made a point of adding that he will remain skeptical about most of the Nimitz UFO witness accounts until the military releases more electronic data from the incident. But look, at this point, I did not actually see the object aggressively accelerate to the left, as the video shows, to actually prove that.
Because you were at a distance where you couldn't make visual contact with your own eyes.
Right.
And so what's happening in the video is a little ambiguous as a result.
Right, yeah. And that part kind of sucks, because I can't confirm that the object aggressively accelerated that way. But I have my feelings based off of my experience with my equipment and also just logic when it comes to, physics.
I want to ask you some questions based on the theories that American armchair skeptics have put forward, like whether it was birds or whether it was some sort of thermal weather event. I mean, I'm sure you have had enough flight time that you've seen birds.
Yep. Birds normally fly close to the surface of the ground. So, for example, you're not going to see birds flying at 5,000 feet. You're going to see them, more down at like 2,000 feet and below, like down to the surface. That's just kind of how birds normally operate, but they're typically not alone. So you can physically see them in a flock or whatever. You don't see birds at 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 feet. That's just not how birds operate. So birds are out of the question. And just so that I anticipate your next question, there are weather balloons that people launch, but this was not a weather balloon. Because a balloon, it just ascends and floats from low to high altitude. It doesn't behave erratically. I mean, it's just a balloon. So that was out of the question. It wasn't, to the best of my knowledge, a cruise missile or any kind of test aircraft that we possibly may have not known about, just because of the way it was behaving. Like I said, it was just very erratic. It would go from like 50 feet off the ground, which when you're out in the open ocean, off the coast of San Diego, it looked like it was just hovering over the water. But there was no method of propulsion that was keeping it airborne. No wings, no heat keeping it airborne or aloft.
Have you ever seen a weather event on an AT FLIR?
I would say if I captured this object in my senses independently, like I was the only one that saw or tracked it, I might have blown it off as something like a weather event. But the amount of people and sensors from other independent sources who found it, given the time period Dave Fravor saw it, and an hour and a half later I went out and saw it, and we captured basically an object with the same description, leads me to believe that a weather event would be unlikely.
Did it surprise you or provide any kind of relief seeing the Navy official declare the Tic Tac video genuine before the New York Times vetted and published the Fleur 1 video? The short video clip floated around Samizdat style on various online UFO forums, a situation that had led skeptics and galaxy brain conspiracy theorists to suspect the video was a hoax perpetrated by the first group to host the video on its servers, a German 3D animation company called Vision Unlimited. In an interview with a German paranormal website, Vision Unlimited manager Philip Schneider said the video was not its work product, but could not explain why its servers were hosting it all the way back in 2007, and a genuine UAP when that happened in the West Washington Post last September.
No, not surprised. Validation for sure.
We've only got 1 minute left.
We will continue the interview next week then.
Absolutely.
Look, I hope that you guys found this a little bit enlightening. We tried to corroborate different news sources, different articles, and different people having been interviewed about this to give you all a better understanding of what this event was all about. Because, I mean, we all hear about it, but what is it actually about, right, Dave? I mean, this is the meat.
Yeah, it is. And there's the music, and this has been another shiny side out with Dave and Mekki. Catch you next week. Stay tuned for Jerbear's show After Hours. We got a little bit of a sneak peek earlier on. And here it is in full. Take care.